Hey, how are you doing? In today's video, I want to talk to you about being different, being unique, and what God told me about who you are. You know, I got a message last month. A young man couldn't have been more than 23 years old. He said, "Dr. Silver, I'm dying inside. Every single day, I wake up and I try to be someone I'm not." He works in an office where everyone dresses the same way, talks the same way, thinks the same way. And he's an artist. He paints, he creates. But he hides it because his coworkers would laugh. His family wants him to be a lawyer. His girlfriend wants him to be more ambitious. His friends want him to be the guy who parties on the weekends. So he's all of those people to all of those people, and he's nobody to himself. He told me, "I feel like I'm living a lie every single second. And the worst part is, nobody even notices. Nobody cares. I'm just another face in the crowd." He wasn't sleeping. He was taking anxiety medication at 23 years old. His doctor said his stress levels were through the roof, and he kept asking himself the same question over and over. Why can't I just be normal? Why do I have to be different? Why can't I want what everyone else wants? The pain in those questions was so real, I could feel it through the screen. Listen, after 30 years as a psychologist and Christian counselor, I've seen something that breaks my heart. We are raising a generation that's terrified of being themselves. If you're tired of wearing masks that don't fit your face, if you're exhausted from performing a version of yourself that isn't real, hit that subscribe button. Because we need to talk about this. Because here's what I know. After 40 years of marriage, and 7 kids, and thousands of hours sitting with people just like you. When you finally understand who you actually are, your entire life changes. Not just gets better, changes completely. And the Bible has been trying to tell us this truth for 2,000 years. But most of us are too busy listening to everyone else to hear it. But to understand how this all started, I need to take you somewhere that I've been thinking about for weeks now. And on that day, everything seemed perfectly normal. It was a Tuesday morning. I was 7 years old. I remember walking into my classroom at school. It was the 1970s. My teacher was Mrs. Henderson. She was strict. Everything had to be in lines. Everything had to be organized. Everything had to fit the system. I was a strange kid. I know that now. I was quiet, but not shy. I was observant. I noticed things about people that other kids didn't see. I saw pain in my mother's eyes when she thought nobody was looking. I saw fear in my father when money got tight. I saw loneliness in my neighbors. So I drew. I drew all the time. I filled notebooks with pictures of people and their emotions. It was the only way I knew how to process what I was feeling. But on that Tuesday morning, Mrs. Henderson saw one of my drawings. It was a picture of my grandmother. Not a perfect drawing, not photographic or realistic, but it had something in it. A sadness, a depth, something true. She called me up in front of the entire class, and she held it up. And she said, "This is wrong. This is not what a person looks like. John, you need to learn to see things the way they really are." She threw it away, in front of everyone. I remember the heat in my face. I remember other kids laughing. I remember thinking, I'm broken. There's something wrong with the way I see the world. From that day on, I stopped drawing. I started trying to see things the way Mrs. Henderson said I should see them, the way everyone else saw them. But something in me got smaller. Something in me went quiet. The breaking point came when I was in high school. I was a senior, and I met this girl named Eleanor. She was different too. She dressed differently. She read poetry. She asked questions that made teachers uncomfortable. She didn't fit. And I was immediately drawn to her because for the first time in years, I felt like maybe I wasn't the only one who was broken. We started talking. We'd sit in the library for hours. She'd read me her poems, and I'd tell her about my drawings. the ones I hadn't shown anyone since 7th grade. She said, "John, you're not broken. You're just not like everyone else. And that's not a flaw. That's a gift." For the first time in years, I believed it might be true. But then something happened that I'll never forget. Eleanor got pregnant. She was 17. And her family made her get married immediately to the guy who got her pregnant. He was cruel. Not physically, but psychologically. He made her feel like she was stupid for writing poetry. He told her it was a waste of time. And slowly, I watched her disappear. The girl who asked the hard questions started asking for permission before she spoke. The girl who was different started trying to be normal. I saw her 5 years later. She was a shell. She had 2 kids. She was exhausted. And she told me, "I gave up who I was to fit into someone else's life. And now, I don't even know if I can get back to myself." That moment devastated me, not because I was in love with her, though I think I was, but because I realized something that changed the entire direction of my life. The world doesn't want you to be yourself. The world wants you to be useful, predictable, safe, easy to understand. And if you're not willing to fight for who you actually are, you will lose yourself completely. But here's what nobody tells you, and this is the thing that most people never recover from. The moment Eleanor gave up who she was, that wasn't the worst part. The worst part came after. The psychological wound that cuts the deepest. She lost her voice. Not metaphorically. She literally stopped speaking. She'd sit in rooms with her husband and his friends, and she wouldn't say a word. She told me once that she was afraid that if she opened her mouth, something wrong would come out. But the real wound, the one that broke her completely, was the shame. She was ashamed that she'd been so weak. Ashamed that she'd let someone else decide who she was allowed to be. Ashamed that she'd wasted years of her life trying to be someone she wasn't. And then came the loneliness. The kind of loneliness that happens when you're surrounded by people, but nobody knows who you actually are. Her own children didn't know her. Her husband didn't know her. She didn't know herself. She told me, "I'm 30 years old, and I have no idea who Eleanor actually is. I've been so many people for so many other people that I disappeared." That silence, that realization, that's the wound that breaks people. If you've ever felt that kind of emptiness, that kind of disconnection from yourself, leave a comment down below. Tell me, because you're not alone in this, and your voice matters. Now, when I think about being yourself, about being unique and different, I always come back to one person in the Bible: Joseph. Not Joseph when he was successful. Not Joseph when he was powerful in Egypt. I'm talking about Joseph when he was at his absolute lowest, when he'd lost everything, when being himself had cost him more than he ever thought he'd have to pay. You see, Joseph had a gift. He could interpret dreams. He could see things that other people couldn't see. It was different. It was strange. Most people didn't understand it. And his father loved him for it. His father saw something in Joseph that was unique and valuable, and he loved him openly for being exactly who he was. But his brothers hated him for it. They hated that he was different. They hated that their father loved him more, and they hated that he didn't apologize for being himself. So they threw him in a pit. They sold him into slavery. They told their father he was dead. Can you imagine that? Being thrown in a dark pit by your own family because you were different? Because you didn't fit? Because you wouldn't pretend to be someone you weren't? Joseph spent 13 years in slavery. 13 years in a foreign land, separated from everything and everyone he knew. And he had every reason to become bitter, every reason to give up, every reason to stop being himself and just become whoever his masters wanted him to be. But he didn't. Even in slavery, Joseph kept being who he was. He kept interpreting dreams. He kept being honest. He kept being different. And it eventually led to his freedom. It eventually led to him becoming a leader. It eventually led to him saving his entire nation. But here's the thing that people miss about Joseph's story. The thing that gets me every single time. When his brothers finally came to him, years later, when they realized it was him, they were terrified. They thought he would punish them. They thought he would destroy them. And Joseph wept. He wept because he realized something. He had lost 13 years. 13 years of his life in the darkness. 13 years of pain and suffering and loneliness. But he hadn't lost himself. While everyone else was telling him who he should be, he kept fighting for who he actually was. And when he finally got the chance to speak, he looked at his brothers, and he said something that changed everything. He said, "You meant it for evil, but God meant it for good." He understood that being himself, being unique, being different, had come at a cost. A real cost. Years of his life. Suffering that he never deserved. But it also made him free. It made him powerful. It made him real. So here's what I've learned from 30 years of sitting with people like that young man who messaged me, like Eleanor, like all of us who've been tempted to disappear into someone else's idea of who we should be. Being yourself is the most dangerous thing you can do in this world. Because the world doesn't want you to be free. The world wants you to be controllable. But it's also the only thing that will save your life. So here's what I want you to do starting today. And I want you to actually do this. Not think about it. Not plan it. Actually do it. First, I want you to write down 3 things that make you different. Not in a good way according to society, but in a true way according to your heart. What do you see that other people don't see? What do you want that other people don't want? What do you believe that makes people uncomfortable? Write it down, just for you. Nobody else needs to know, because you need to acknowledge those things before you can protect them. You need to name them before you can fight for them. Second, I want you to identify one person in your life who's trying to make you smaller. Not out of malice. Maybe they love you, but they're asking you to be someone you're not. And I want you to have a conversation with them. Not angry, not accusatory, but honest. Say something like, "I've been trying to be the person you wanted me to be, but I'm losing myself in the process. And I need you to love the person I actually am, not the person you think I should be." Some people will hear that, some won't. But you'll know who actually loves you and who loves the idea of you. And that clarity is worth everything. Third, I want you to do something that scares you, something that's uniquely you, something that nobody else is doing. If you're an artist, paint something that nobody asked you to paint. If you're a dreamer, write down a dream that you've been too afraid to share. If you're a questioner, ask the hard questions that nobody else is asking. My wife and I, we've been married 40 years. And you know what I love most about her? It's not that she's perfect. It's that she's completely herself. She's loud when she feels like being loud. She's quiet when she feels like being quiet. She doesn't apologize for taking up space. And that took courage. That took years of learning to ignore what other people thought and listen to what her soul was telling her. That's what I want for you. That young man who messaged me, I told him to quit his job. Not immediately, but to start looking for work that aligned with who he actually was. 6 months later, he sent me a picture. He was painting, in a studio, with paint all over his clothes and joy all over his face. He said, "I'm making half the money. I'm working twice as hard. And for the first time in my life, I'm not dying inside." That's what being yourself feels like. Not easier, not more comfortable, but real, alive, true. I think about Eleanor too. I don't know where she is now. but I know that the last time we talked, she was starting to write again. She was sneaking poems when her husband wasn't home. She was starting to remember who she was before everyone told her who she should be. It's not easy. It never is. Becoming yourself after years of being someone else is one of the hardest things you'll ever do. But it's also the most important thing you'll ever do. Because your life doesn't belong to anyone else. It belongs to you. And you were made different on purpose. God didn't make a mistake when He made you unique. He made you that way deliberately. He made you different so that you would bring something into this world that nobody else could bring. If you're ready to stop dying inside and start actually living, hit that like button. If you're tired of performing for people who don't even know you, subscribe to this channel because we talk about this every single week. And in the comments, I want to know, what's one thing about yourself that you've been hiding? What's one part of who you are that you've been too afraid to show the world? Tell me. To finally be themselves. I'll see you in the next one.